Welcome today to the Culture Chat. I have Brandon Budd joining me on our episode. As an entrepreneurial and innovative leader, Brandon specializes in driving revenue and operational success in client-focused B2B companies. He's a problem solver at heart who has applied unique combination of management excellence, strategic and intuition, and technical know-how to businesses in the IT and data center space, manufacturing, and aerospace industries. He comes from a wealth of experience as well as graduating from the Aerospace Engineering and Business Administration at the University of Toronto and Arizona State University. Welcome, Brandon. So happy to have you here today. I love to have this conversation where we really touch into many different industries and all the facets of those industries, as well as speaking to the culture and the people component that tie into how those businesses are built and can be successful or maybe learn to be more successful. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, sure. I started out, like you said, in the engineering and aerospace world, and I moved on uh, after that into telecommunications. Worked on a startup business in the telecom world when that was really exciting during the dot-com boom. And after that, sort of pursued a passion project, opened up some food service businesses, a couple restaurants, and that was fun. That allowed me to get my creative side out there. And since then, I spent the last almost 17 years building up a company called Serverlift, which is a company that services the data center and IT industry. So that's the industry sort of been in for quite a while now. And yeah, here I am.
Excellent. So I really do want to hear more about the data IT space, but you and I did talk a little bit before the call. My home, we are food lovers. 150%. It's food all the way, especially with
Right.
all the adolescent boys in the house. So here is the question of the day. If you were stranded on an island, you could only have one dish delivered to you, 3 meals a day for the rest of eternity. What dish might that be that you would choose as a fellow food lover?
Okay, so I'm gonna tweak my answer that we talked about before the call, and it's gonna be a mix of grilled meats because I want the variety, and with a side of grilled vegetables and a side salad.
I love it. It's
Yeah.
very healthy. The add-on is what beverage of choice?
What beverage I mean, you have to go with coffee. It doesn't go with that meal, but if I'm on an island, I need coffee.
Fair enough. My 13-year-old son will be thrilled to hear the answer for today. So let's pivot and let's talk about your background in data and IT and the tech space because obviously this is a very hot market and industry.
Yeah.
It also has been a bit volatile in the past year and a half or so in terms of business decisions, workforce strategy, and people practices. So from that standpoint, there's a lot of news happening. We have return to office. We have obviously many reductions happening. We also have a pickup in hiring happening in the fall right now, September, which is great. Many people are optimistic for the September surge of hiring. What has been your experience in that space of hiring people within the tech space? What's been your learning significant takeaways that you have in your last 20 plus years of working?
Well, specifically in the IT and data center space,
Sure. Or
um,
beyond,
I,
whoever you'd like to speak to.
I think that's a big deal right now because to me it feels like we're in, I mentioned the dot-com boom. Some younger people might not even remember that, but it with the AI movement that's happening today, I think we're kind of in a repeat. It feels like a similar type of growth curve, right? That this AI thing is exploding. Nobody knows where it's going. There's probably 1,000 AI based companies or companies that are implementing those features. And the world that I just have come from for the last decade and a half, they're going to have they're responding. I mean, the news that if people follow the news of that type of industry, the Amazons, Metas, Microsofts, Googles of the world, they are expanding at rapid rates. They're investing billions and billions of dollars into new data centers, and they're going to have to find people to actually work there
Mm.
that actually know what they're doing. And so the big concern I've had is where are those people going to come from? There's some, really great technical college, 2-year colleges that are starting to implement degrees for data center type work, but I think we're heading for a shortage on the labor side of that industry. And the demand is just going so fast that I'm not sure that they're ready to catch up. So that's something that I've been thinking about quite a bit.
So I'd love to hear more actually, because I remember when the IT space, especially for degrees, became super impacted and saturated with students, right? Who then
Hmm.
turned out of their programs and had to find jobs. And it came to a point, I'd say in the last 5 years, where I've heard more and more, even as an IT professional, it used to be a guarantee that you would have a job, right?
Right.
And that's changed within,
Yeah.
say that those who have been academically trained to be IT specialists. So now you're mentioning that there may be a shortage. So what kind of shortage are we talking about? Do you think it's more hands-on labor, or are we talking about those IT specialists who have a niche focus on IT and data center knowledge?
Well, I think there's been a shortage of the people that are on the programming side for quite some time, and the evidence of that is the fact that all these big companies have fallen all over themselves to grab as many of those people as they possibly can from their competitors, right? But certainly, for the people that work in data centers, which is super important, I think most of the average people in the world don't understand that everything they do, including us talking on this podcast, that's running through servers in a data center somewhere. And there have to be people there that have to make sure that those machines are running all the time. There has to be redundancy. Data centers the biggest thing for them is uptime. So those people are a little bit more on the hardware side. And you mentioned manual labor. I think a lot of the people that go into technology-based careers that end up in working in data center environments don't realize, well, the business I just, that I was just in for the last 17 years, that's our whole business was built around that, was the fact that people would come into these data centers and they had to, there was a physical manual labor component to their job, lifting these big heavy servers, moving them around, installing them, pulling them out, refurbishing them, whatever the case might be, that they weren't expecting at all.
Hmm. And so, but they come with the technical knowledge of
Yeah.
how to run and upkeep a data center. So, what's the culture like? I mean, speaking from my experience comes from a tech background. Data centers were the norm. I never worked, hmm, we had small data centers on site, but very, very small. Like many companies in the tech space, we partnered with another company, a third party company, and used a data center that was oftentimes located in Arizona or another location. So I don't have any firsthand experience of what the culture is like in a data center.
Of course, I think they're all different, but I think it would surprise most people. It's not what they would think is the culture in the ivory tower offices of these technology companies where there's, healthy snacks falling from the sky and people sitting in, curated gardens reading, that I don't think it's not like that quite at all. it's tough. A lot the people that work there have a very, very hard job. Very often it's without any recognition. It's without a lot of appreciation. They're sort of forgotten. I mean, these data centers, they're not the part of the technology that anybody talks about. That's not the consumer facing aspect of things. So it's they work in anonymity. It's sometimes it's really difficult work. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I remember once I was at a data center downtown in Phoenix, and the products that our company provided to them were really life changing for them. And there was a gentleman there who was saying that he had to stay extra off of his shift, which was an overnight shift, because he had to wait for another person to come on site, the next person starting his next shift, to help him with the physical aspects of his work. And there was no choice. They had to get this stuff moved or installed. And and he was exhausted after 8 hours, but had to stay 10 or 11 hours just to get it done because there needed to be an extra pair of hands.
Right.
So,
So it sounds to me like, I mean, I just would like to clarify, I never actually sat in an office where I had healthy snacks falling from the sky, but I
okay,
do understand. I have seen a few gardens floating around in some of the HQ offices I've been in, but never
right.
healthy snacks falling. Um, I think of selecting people to come into the right, the right people coming into the right environment. And to me, when you have an environment like maybe in the IT space, especially data centers, where you do have a very demanding role that requires the two components of technical knowledge and education, as well as like the manual components of laborious work. I think of how do you ensure that you are hiring the right people to fill those roles and that can meet the demands while also building a culture and a rapport when you know some of these other facets on the back end, like it may feel like a thankless job, or it may not feel like, there's a lot of autonomy in what you're doing day in and day out. How do you ensure that you're picking the right people to fill the teams and fill the data centers?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question, actually, because I think that the principles that would apply to making sure you hire those kinds of people and the right types of people for those positions, those are the principles you need to apply for any position in any company, in any culture, in any job. It means intentionally hiring. It doesn't just mean hiring somebody who has the skills. It means hiring somebody who has the right mindset, the right behaviors, the right motivators. It's somebody who's not going to need, if they have to work in anonymity or if they have to work without a lot of recognition and appreciation. There's people that are wired for that, and there's people that aren't. And so if you hire somebody who has the skill set, they have the education, but they need the pat on the back, or they need to be in a team where they get recognition all the time, that may not be a good job for them. At least not for you to hire them. So, that's something that I realized a long time ago, like intentional hiring, you have to, that's a thing. You have to really do that in order to make sure you have the right people in the right positions in your company.
And so, from that component, I think intentionally hiring is imperative and picking the right people for the right job. What what would a process look like in your world that would outline what intentional hiring would look like more on a tactical level?
Um, so over the years, I developed I'm not saying it's perfect, but certainly a methodology that I love to use in that. And that starts with knowing that I can't figure it out by myself. I don't think anybody can. So the thing that changed things for me was when I started to implement assessments and and benchmarking into my process, because that takes out the bias that I had, and it takes out um, it gives you a real starting point for understanding not just what I think I want for that position, but what the job actually requires. And, I think it was about 8 or 9 months ago, I was trying to hire for a supply chain manager position. And I had a candidate came in. I never would have thought she would have been a good fit for the position. Just, we all have biases just based on, you know, who she was, how she spoke. We all sort of want to reflect ourselves, I think. And so if you're a social person, you want to bring somebody on who's going to be social with you. And she wasn't that way, and that was okay. But once I assessed her and put her assessment up against the benchmark, she was a remarkably close match to what I thought what the data had showed that we actually required for that job. Now, unfortunately, she ended up having a family emergency, having to move out of state, so she couldn't take the job. But, just on my own, I probably never would have thought to hire her.
Hmm. I I have worked at companies that do assessments, and there's always been a bit of mixed perception, even within the HR space, about the value of those assessments. Are we talking aptitude tests, or what kind of assessments are you thinking?
So the one that I've used for many years is called TTI, um, and I know there's others, but I find that's very in depth. It goes, I mean, it has DISC in there, which a lot of people are familiar with, but it goes beyond that. It goes into, you know, personality motivators, their soft skills, and it's not by itself. Like you're right, the assessments by themselves don't aren't going to get you to where you want to be. To me, benchmarking the job, having a persona built out in advance that of what that job requires is and the assessments, those are two sides of the same coin. So if you need somebody who's going to be a salesperson and they have to pick up the phone and they have to have, in disc what would be like a high I, they have to be a very social person, they have to be able to carry on conversations with people, initiate conversations with people. If a person doesn't have that, they may not fit that job real well. If they need to rely on their instincts uh, at the drop of a hat versus researching everything and having all the data before having a conversation, those are things you have to know going in. So that's a big part of it. I also think ensuring a values match is important too.
Mm. So let's back up. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, we're talking about throughout the interview process and creating a persona you might do at the onset prior to uh, inviting candidates to apply. So how do you, but all of that's internal, how do
hmm
you as a leader help to attract those candidates? What is it about the job description or maybe the marketing aspects that go into candidate attraction that help you get the right candidates into the funnel?
Well, I think you have to get intentional with that too. You have to get intentional with the job description and the posting and just be honest right up front. You know, if you say at the very outset, before you get into requirements and duties and all that good stuff, if you say, do you love talking to people? Do you love helping people? If you love helping people, this job might be for you, right? Get more conversational
Mm-hmm.
at the outset of those job descriptions. Say what it requires and what it doesn't. If they're going to have to pick up the phone and call people all day long, say that. If you don't like picking up the phone and calling people, if you don't like talking to people, please don't apply. You know. And then what's nice is that once you have a benchmark, usually, at least the ones I've used with TTI, they give you questions you can ask that tell you about the most important things that you've identified. And so I'll give that to a person who may not be the hiring decision maker, but they can start making initial calls to candidates and asking one or two of those questions and find out very, very quickly whether this person has the potential to be a good hire or not.
So I, I have my education in marketing, and I can't help but point out the obvious that some of the aspects you're talking about right now really do resonate with marketing tactics that a company uses to attract clients. We're talking
Hmm.
benchmarking, creating personas, being honest, transparency, maybe about your offering, which is a job, and targeting who you're looking for, right? And ensuring that the people that you're looking for that fit are the ones that you bring in for that next step of interviews. Yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
we didn't really talk about this at all before,
Right.
but they are marketing tactics that help.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on that from wearing your marketing hat and thinking about
Right.
the talent attraction component?
I love that. I think that that's really insightful. I mean, I never thought about it that way, but that you're right. That is exactly what we do with marketing. We want to find the right people. One of my good friends and mentors, her name is Kristen Zhivago. She has a marketing agency, and always says, the old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So she says, our job in marketing is to find thirsty horses, right?
Yeah.
I know I'm not even I don't even think I can attribute that quote to her. I think she got it from somewhere else, um, but that's the same kind of thing. Everybody who's in the job market needs a job, right? They need to pay their bills. It's tough, but you owe it to them as well as yourself and your company to try to make sure you bring in the people that are the best fit. And just like with marketing, I think that's really, really clever. I never put those two things together.
So there's no such thing as a perfect candidate, right? And
True.
so there has to be a leeway, even if you set up an intentional hiring strategy. As our
Yeah.
audience, maybe leaders, maybe HR professionals right now, they're going to be sitting there saying, well, I'm a team of one. I only have so much bandwidth in order to change our hiring practice, I would have to re-educate our hiring managers. This is a huge undertaking, Brandon. I like what you're saying, but I'm not sure I can implement it. So how do you find balance? There's no perfect candidate, but I do want to begin to transform our hiring practice to be more aligned on this level. How could a hiring manager, leader, or HR professional find that balance?
Well, it took me years to implement all this. It's, I mean, you could do it overnight if you really know what you were doing. And like you said, you had the resources, but you're right. I think it's just a matter of finding one or two things and slowly making that change, one thing at a time, one aspect at a time. Um, there was other aspects of my hiring process that I did where I sent out probably the first maybe maybe I don't know if it would be non-traditional. You could probably tell me if it's non-traditional or not. That I implemented at least over a decade ago is why I sent out every candidate some sort of some written questions because I just wanted to see how they wrote, how they communicated in writing, not just verbally in an interview. Because I knew they were going to have to send emails to customers and vendors or whoever, and I just wanted to see how they did that. If some people are well spoken, but their writing is horrible, and some people are the opposite, and some people have both. So um, there are little things like that that you can do that are outside of assessments and benchmarks.
And now, of course, we have the added component of AI, which can
True.
blur um,
Yeah.
the results of that space. How have you experienced AI entering into hiring, entering into candidate selection, job descriptions? How's AI playing a role in your experience?
Well, I haven't really thought about it too much in terms of incoming candidates, but it's certainly a concern. I mean, now you have me thinking about it. But I know that for job seekers, it means that they're all the things that they used to tell us in like career management offices and stuff like that. I mean, I remember hanging around the career office on campus back in the day, and they used to say, customize your resume for every job posting. Don't lie, but if they're hitting keywords, well, that's super important now. That's like, yeah, I have a good friend of mine he's actually an executive level, but he's out looking for his next position now. And he told me that he took a job description, he plugged it into one AI tool and said, and then plugged in his resume and said, give me phrases that I can, or rewrite my resume, something like that, rewrite my resume or rewrite phrases within my resume that are particular for this job description. And he did. And he went through this whole process using AI, and he got like an interview call like within 45 minutes. Because what's happening on the other side is that these hiring folks, they're just waiting for these AI based systems to let them know who's hit the most keywords.
Hmm. Well, and as a job seeker right now, I definitely am more privy to many of the tools with varying degrees of success. This may be its own podcast or blog conversation about the the experience incorporating AI. I can say openly that I think if I were in a full time, it's not just as a job seeker, it's sort of being this, small business entrepreneur mindset. If I were still sitting in a full time role with a really clear lane around me, I might have been a lot more hesitant to enter into the AI space. But because I'm out connecting, networking, working on building the Culture Chat brand, it incorporating AI and the different aspects it can leverage to help me be more well-rounded, more robust in skills that might not be naturally suited to me. It has helped expand, and it's kind of also opened the door to say, oh, like, oh, that's how you do that. That's not so hard. I can do that myself, right? But it's been a bridge where you could have sat there 5, 10 years ago and said, I don't know how to do that. I guess I can't do
Right.
it. But I do think, in terms of tools for job seekers, you're absolutely right. There are many tools out there that will help customize your resume. And I think what I've experienced in this space and exploring it is, if you're not careful and you don't apply the human touch, it comes across very sanitized, which I know resumes tend to be a little bit stiff anyways, usually. But so you can't just leave it to AI to handle it for you. You have to put the human touch to it, or it feels like it didn't come from a person. It feels too stiff. It feels too I don't even know the right word.
Well,
Sanitized, that's the best.
the resume is a way to get the interview, right? Not a way to get the job. It's the interview that's supposed to get you the job.
Right,
But do
right.
you think, just based on what you're saying, don't you think then that even increases the importance on the hiring side of the sort of intentional hiring methodologies? Now you actually, that they're hitting all the skill keywords, or all, and it may be true, it may be not true, but that actually makes doesn't that make the importance of like, what are our what company values do we want? What kind of culture do we want here?
Yes.
We have to figure out a way to find out if that person fits that even more.
I 100% agree. I think it has made talent acquisitions roles really difficult because it's increased, um, the number of applicants, right, tenfold, because it's such an easy snap your fingers. I've updated my resume, it'll fit. And if they don't use a discerning eye to really go through the pool and select the top candidates, right, then their work's increased. Yes, but it does make the intentional hiring, because you want to make sure that you're not just taking the face value of their resume, but ensuring that they're actually going to make a fit. Which,
Yeah, like
back to your point of assessments, is a way to definitely delve more deeply. And there's lots of different versions of assessments, but it can help provide a more well-rounded view of the candidate. It also can, having participated in some aptitude assessments, there can be a little
hmm
bit of discrimination. It's proven
hmm
that not everybody has had the same access to background and education, so it can be a
sure.
discriminatory tool as well if it's not used properly. So it's kind of this fine line. Are you looking at the whole person? Hopefully, the candidate's looking at the whole company. Are you looking at the whole person when you set out to interview and make an offer?
But by the way, I'll tell you, like the assessments and benchmark, those aren't things that are going to qualify or completely disqualify a person at all. Um, but if you like that candidate and you think they're going to do a good job and they kind of hit the you know the main driving forces, like they want to follow systems rather than rebuild systems, and that's what you need for that job. Um, you still you still have to make sure, for example, that let's say there's a person that really loves to go out to happy hour with their coworkers every day, and that's what they want. That's the kind of that's the kind of work life that they want. But you have a culture where it's more focused on work life balance. Everybody's gonna like family oriented, and people want to come and do their job and just go home. You know, again, doesn't mean it's a qualifying or disqualifying, but at least you know who you're bringing on board and how that's going to impact your culture, and then also how to manage to it, right? Like if we, I think the first time we talked a lot about like different methods of recognition. It's not true that everybody's just satisfied with financial recognition or an attaboy, right? Some people like attaboys, some people like bonuses and don't care about attaboys. But you have to know, because if you think that you're going to bring somebody on board that's supposed to mold themselves to your culture and your management style, you're in for a kind of a very short process because that person's going to leave. You want
Right.
to find somebody that's going to mesh with your management style, or at least that you can modify to them, and that's going to sort of fit the culture, even if they modify it a little bit. You don't want things that are like that far off.
So I love that you mention the culture because, of course, this is the sweet spot. And hiring the right people is a direct funnel to building a positive culture and a good culture. It's
Absolutely.
not inherent, but the chances are much greater that you're going to fuel your culture with good energy and motivation, productivity,
Mhm.
etc. But let's talk just briefly to our audience about intentionally designing culture because sometimes culture is already in place and it's needs to be redesigned. Sometimes, you maybe are in a startup and you're having the chance to build culture from the ground up.
hmm
How do you set out as a leader to intentionally design culture?
Well, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, you have to start with your mission statement, your values. You have to know, a lot of businesses just don't do this, right? Or they kind of do it haphazardly. They don't really think about it. Management teams don't get together and think about it. But if you have to have a specific mission. You have to have a specific goals. Um, you can't have a cohesive organization if you don't have that. And so once you do that, once you have those values down, then you actually have to think about that in your hiring process. And um, took me a lot of years. It took me a lot of years to change the culture around them in my last company, because you have to do it one person at a time.
Right.
You nothing. You said no perfect hire, and sometimes you make mistakes, and sometimes there's people there that were from before that shouldn't be there, and but let's say every new hire is an incredible opportunity, right? Like you have this great opportunity to net improve the company. And I always say to people when I hire them that this is not going to last forever. I mean, it's like death and taxes. It's inevitable that at some point it's going to end. As much as you want to like finish your career, at least okay, let's say you spend 40 years there, but your career is finished. You're going to leave eventually. So let's hope that you have improved the company for your time here, and that the company has improved you as a person and a professional for your time here.
Right. So our fantastic producer on the back end sent a quote, which is not word for word, but basically, good culture is not a birthright. It's something you have to intentionally work at every day. And I think that what we're speaking to, what we have been speaking to for our audience is that one key way to drive that culture and that work is by implementing a strong hiring practice with a strategic mindset of how it's going to fuel your culture, how it's going to fuel filling your organization with the right people that can fit the roles um, and be happy and successful, right? Therefore, productive and engaged along the way. I think one thing we spoke to before that I'd love to raise as we wrap up the conversation, which is you've mentioned before basically that customers don't see more than one culture or individual cultures within an organization. They really
Yeah.
see the the company as one. And so, what's your final thoughts on how a hiring manager, a leader, or an HR professional listening today could work through that process and help ensure that the subcultures really fill an umbrella of good culture that the customers and clients see so they can, so the organization can be its most successful self?
Um, well, my philosophy that I take to building a good culture is one of, ultimate customer service, selfless service. I coach people whether you just do it mentally or if you actually do this, when you talk to somebody, I don't care who it is, think hand over your heart. I'm going to, I'm going to be of service to you. And now you could build companies a lot of different ways, but you don't have to be so customer centric. A lot of companies are more employee centric, and they feel like that trickles down to good customer service. But I think the one thing that I like to think about is that there, anybody who needs something from you is a customer,
Mhm.
internally, externally, vendors, customers, colleagues. If your colleague needs something so that they can get their job done from you can't say, I'm going to put that down on my priority list because someone else external to the organization also needs something from me. So if you are able to implement that kind of mentality that just I need to help everybody and everybody is within the organization is there for the same purpose, even if they're doing different jobs in different departments, but it's all for the betterment and success of the team and the company. That's to me where it sort of starts and ends. If you don't do that, then it's going to be a group of fiefdoms
Mhm.
that are just all trying to. And it's so interesting. I have in my hiring process, there's one multiple choice question that I send people. There's a number of questions I'll send them, but one of the questions, and I could send it to you after the conversation. It's like it says it's something to the effect of a customer contacts you needing something that you need to get from your boss, and 3 days later you haven't gotten them the information you had asked your boss, but they didn't get it to you yet. The customer emails you like 3 days later saying, "Hey, where's that information?" And I give them four different ways to answer. But one of the ways is you let the customer up, you apologize for the delay, and you let the customer know you're still waiting for your boss to get you the answer. And most people, a lot of people will choose that because it sounds like one of the best answers. But I try to coach them afterwards, even if I hire them. It's not like a deal breaker. And I explain that, hey, listen, by saying that, it's so subtle. By saying that, you're saying, I'm doing my best, but somebody else in the organization is just dropping the ball. That doesn't make you look good. It might, by making yourself look good at the expense of someone else in the organization, you're just bringing the whole organization down in their eyes, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. So having that team mentality and thinking that everybody is on that same goal, that same mission, I think that has to be sort of paramount.
Brandon, it has been a pleasure. I want to ask you one last question, which
Sure.
is any reading recommendations you may have for our audience today?
Uh, yeah, I would say that as from a management standpoint, um, uh, first break all the rules. That book really made a difference for me because it made me realize that I had to, my job as a leader is to serve those that are working for me, not the other way around, and to make sure they have the tools they need to do their job every day. I love that book, and I always go back to it. And um, that's one that I really think is important.
Excellent. We will be sure to add the link into the details so our listeners can find it. Brandon Budd joining us today on the Culture Chat, where conversation and culture connect, talking about intentional hiring, building intentional culture, and what it takes to peak an organization to its best potential. Also, desert island menu of multiple grilled meats, vegetables, and a side salad. So don't be shy if you have your own desert island meal laid out to leave a comment in the comment box. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you, Brandon, and thank you to our audience. Thank you for joining us on the Culture Chat, where conversation and culture connect. Till next time.
Thanks so much.